Yeah, let's wait for 1 more minute. Okay. So yesterday, like we saw, so in the cheat sheet, like which I shared with you, like I we completed like run a new container and then manage a container. Okay. And also the most important thing, like manage images. So most of that, like we also saw that. Like if we share my screen. Okay. So we saw all these items like running a container and then so except these two, like the hostname and the DNS entry. So in this, like the manage container, like we saw all these commands, like so these are very important, like in the basic debugging or maintaining this Docker containers. Okay. So also these images, like we saw Docker pull image. So we pulled multiple images like Nginx image, like Ubuntu image, and all this stuff. Okay. We also saw this like removing an image like Docker RMI image. So in order to delete an image and Docker images, this is to just list all those images that are present in the on your machine, like host machine. We also have like Docker dangle removing these images. Like so, if you want to remove any unused images, like so, then you can use this command. Okay. So this is to build an image from the Docker container. So we'll see this building an image from the Docker file once we start the Docker file thing. Okay. So also like this is to tag an image kind of, and then yeah. So this is to tag an image from the Docker file. So let's see few of these commands in action. Like we saw the Docker pull image, right? So basically, like if I want to pull an image, so I'll be, for example, Docker pull Ubuntu. So it will just pull this image from the Docker Hub, which is the public registry associated with the Docker. Like, if you want to make use of any other repositories, like any private repositories or the repositories which are present in AWS or Azure or Google Compute Engine, so you need to log in into those respective repositories, and then you can issue these commands. Like, so when you issue these commands, like at the time, like it will try to pull those images from the respective repository like which is actually configured. Okay. So right now I don't have like any configured third-party configured repositories like AWS or Azure. So but when we see like at a later point of time, so when we deploy these images to AWS or Azure, so then we can actually see that. So this is more about like Docker pull. So the second command is like Docker push. So the Docker push, what it does is like, so it is actually used to push an image to the Docker hub. So in order to push an image to the Docker hub, so you are supposed to have an account with the Docker hub. So hope like you all created your accounts with the Docker hub.
Yes, Pavan.
Okay. So mine is like free tier account. So you can also upgrade. So right now, like my account, like in the free tier, like you'll get one private repository. So when you upgrade, like you can actually have like multiple private repositories. Like the pricing, you can actually see. So this is my personal account where uh, I have like unlimited public repositories and then so only one private repository, I believe. And these are the different. So now I have an account with Docker Hub and I can actually push like any images, like any public images. So for example, like yesterday we created an image, right? Docker images. So I created an image called as like Ubuntu with the Nano Pavan. Like, so if you remember, like so I created I started a container from this Ubuntu image, and inside that container, like I installed Nano, and also I created a folder over there, and I created a new image from that running container using this Docker commit. Okay. So using this particular command, like Docker commit container. Okay. And this is the image which got created. So now if I want to push this particular image, so this is right now, this is in my local machine itself, on my laptop itself. But if I want to share it with any of you, so what I need to do is, so I need to push this to the public repository so that like you can actually pull this particular image. So let me actually try to push. So, and this is the command for push. Okay. And before actually pushing, what you need to do is like you need to do Docker login. So when you do like Docker login, so it will actually ask you for username and password. Okay. So once you provide this username and password, so it will automatically log in. It will associate your host machine to this particular Docker account. Okay. Um, so mine, it is already authenticated. So it is not asking me for username and password. Okay. Now let me try to push this particular image, Docker push. And then I can just provide the image name. So this is the image like which I wanted to push, right? Okay. So let me try, but I'll get an error. Lol. So what is it is actually complaining? So it is saying tag does not exist. Okay. So it is saying that this particular image doesn't have. I'm not actually providing the tag over here. Okay. That is because so yesterday, like when we are discussing, I said like so by default we'll have this latest as a tag, and if you specify any tag other than the latest, so you need to explicitly specify that particular tag over here. Okay, or else like it is not actually considered like. So I'll just provide 1.0. Even now you'll be getting an error. So you can see like it is saying like denied requested access to the resource is denied. Okay. So it is actually trying to push the push references refers to the repository. So it is trying to push this particular repository and it is trying to prepare. So it is trying to contact the Docker hub and but unfortunately it actually failed. Okay. So the reason why it got failed is so we need to follow a specific format like when you want to push it to the Docker hub, okay, the public repository of the Docker hub. It should be something like this. The image name should be something like your, it should match your username. So this is my username. So it should match, so it should have like your username slash whatever the image name you're providing and then the tag. So I'll just try to rename this image. So do we have an option to rename an image? So image rename, I don't think so. Like we have, so we should actually tag it like again, like Docker tag. So which particular image I wanted to? So this is the image and then the new image. So I wanted to create a new tag with this like Ubuntu Pavan, and this has like 1.0 as tag. So I want to tag this particular image as something like this PAR. This is my username slash the name which I wanted to have. This is the name of the content image, and then this is the tag. Okay. So now let's see Docker images. So you can actually see a new image, like it got created like with this name, like Aryasomayajulu at the rate slash this is the most. Now we can actually do Docker push. Docker push. So this is the image name, and then tag is like 1.0. You can see that like it is actually getting pushed. So once this is actually completed, like you'll be able to see your image over here. Okay, it's still in progress. So I'll just fetch that particular image, like which I'm uploading. in the Docker playground. Okay, so this is just like a different instance. So you can also try it on your machines if you are in front of PC and then have access to this Docker. So um, so this is how like we push this particular image. So this can be used even for the regular development purposes. So I'll just share a use case with you guys. So which I actually do with my blog. Okay. Um, so I really love this approach. Like I'll just share the approach like which I'm actually following like, for blog. Okay, so this is actually pushed. So you can search, you can refresh this post. Now you can actually see. So this is the image like which was actually pushed. Okay. So now I can actually run this particular image in the Docker platform. Docker one minus IT. This is the image name. I'll paste it here. Ubuntu. So I should also specify the tag name, or else like it doesn't identify this particular slash bin slash match. So it is pulling that image.
So, I mean, if we don't mention the tag, then won't it consider the latest one which is available and download it?
No, so in that case, like you're not supposed to specify the tag name at all. Like so, if you give a specific tag name, so you're supposed to provide that. Like
Oh,
so,
okay.
for example, like here, like my tag name is 1.0. Right? So this is the tag. Like if I don't have a tag, obviously, like it will be the latest. It will be represented with the latest. Okay. So then in that
Okay.
case, like it is not manually required to provide latest. Okay.
So
But in
latest means, I mean, latest is that a default tag which
yeah,
Docker itself provides.
exactly.
Okay.
Okay, so I just pull this particular image and then I'm inside this container. So you can actually see. So this is the file like which we created yesterday, and then this is the folder like which we created yesterday, right? So this is all about like Docker push. So now any one of you, like from any part of the world, like if you have access to the Docker, so you can simply execute this command and you'll be able to run this. Okay. So in this regard, like I just wanted to show you a use case like where Docker is really helping me out. Okay, I'll just go with one of the example like which I use regularly day in and day out like on a regular basis. So this is the blog like which I write. So I'm not a frequent writer, but I write. Um, I use this. This is my blog, like where I write about these technical things. Okay, so XYZ. So how I'm actually making use of Docker in order to create this particular blog, and then so how this Docker is helping me. So I'll just share that use case over here. Okay. So So behind the scenes, like what it is actually doing is like, so in GitHub, like you have an option to create like GitHub pages. So there is something called as like GitHub pages, which is actually used to serve like all the static pages. Okay, so if you have like static HTML pages, so you can just put them in the GitHub repository. So every GitHub public repository, you can have like one GitHub pages associated with that. So it will be something like this. So your username dot github.io. So that will be the URL, default URL that is provided. Okay. So this is actually hosted by the GitHub, and this is my repository, like GitHub XYZ folder is the user. I mean, it's the username. And for this username, like you'll get like one page, like which is associated, which is something like your username dot github.io. Okay. So you can host like many static HTML pages. So you can host like multiple static HTML pages over there. So if you also want to configure this domain name, so there is an option to configure this domain name also. So you can explore that. But the only issue with this particular thing is, so you need to have all these HTML pages. They are supposed to be like static HTML pages. So you need to create all these static HTML pages. So, but in my blog, if you see, so they doesn't actually look like static HTML pages. So you can actually navigate between multiple pages. And then if I want to upload a static HTML page, and then if I wanted to update all these references, like blog references or HTML anchor tag references, so this is usually a tedious task. So this will be a difficult task. So in order to solve that, you have something called as Jekyll. So Jekyll is nothing but like, so it is actually so an admin tool kind of thing. Okay, so where like you'll just, this is based out on Ruby on Rails. Okay, so you need to install, like you need to have Ruby installed, and then so you need to install. This is the package manager, like just like in Node in JavaScript we have npm packages, and .NET we have NuGet packages, right? So and Java like Maven packages. So this bundler and all this stuff, like so these are the these are the packages that are associated with Ruby. Okay. So once you start this Jekyll, so Jekyll it's just like a server. So once you start this Jekyll, what happens is, so it actually opens like an admin kind of theme. Okay. So I'll also show that to you. So this is the so what I did is, so I created like so I have, so every time like what I wanted to do is like, so irrespective of the machine, so I don't want to have this admin tool present on this laptop itself. So I want it to be present on so wherever like I go, like I wanted to access that. Okay. So for that, like what I did is like, so I created a Docker file. I'll just show you the Docker file. So this is the Docker file like which I created. So in this Docker file, what I'm actually doing, so this is a basic Docker file, so it doesn't do like much of the things. Like, so it is actually like I'm taking, we'll talk more about this Docker file, but I'll just explain a few of the things like what I'm actually doing. So I just took like Ubuntu base image. So I'll go through each one of these commands, like okay, in detail. But here, like I'm taking Ubuntu as a base image, and from that, like I installed uh, this particular Unix update, Linux update. And after that, like I installed few softwares that are required, like Ruby full. So I installed like Ruby on this particular Ubuntu machine. And along with that, like I also installed Node.js. Okay. So once that is installed, so I'm installing all these gems. So in gems are nothing but like in Ruby, they're like packages. Okay. So once I install these packages, so I'm actually creating a directory inside this Ubuntu image. Okay. And then so this is the inside this particular image, like again, I'm creating another folder. Okay. And finally, like I'm marking this as like my working directory. So I'll talk more about this. Okay. So once this is actually done, so I'm just saying like I wanted to add this particular file like entry point.sh. Okay. So this is the entry point.sh file which I have on my machine. So it's just like a basic shell script. Like so I wanted to install this bundle and then start this Jekyll server. So once you start this Jekyll server, so it actually gives me an URL. Like you can access via the local host. will be able to access it via localhost. So that is what I'm actually doing. Like I'm starting this entry point.sh. Okay. So I'm giving like few permissions. So since this is Ubuntu, like I'm giving like few permissions on it, like on this entry point.sh so that it will be executed. Okay. So this is the basic thing. So I have this setup on my machine. Okay. One second. Yeah. So I have this entry point.sh, right? So usually what I do, right? So this is the Docker file which I have. Okay. So now what I actually try to do is, so I just go to this particular Docker playground. So here, like I have few commands, like so just ask me like if you have any questions. So this is really interesting. Like even you guys can actually create your own blog. Like, okay. So what I did, so I have this Docker file, and then I have this entry point.sh, right? So I created an image out of this, but out of this Docker file. Okay. So once I created this image, like I pushed it to my public repository. So this is the public repository where I have all my repositories. Now I have a Docker image with Jekyll installed on this. Okay. And it has like all the customizations which I need. Like, so what, which directory it should actually look for, and then where exactly the code is actually present and all that stuff. Okay. So you can actually see right now I'm not copying any code. So it is just like I'm taking this Ubuntu container and then on top of it, like I'm just installing this Jekyll software and then all the packages related to this Jekyll. Okay, and I'm creating like few folders and then finally starting a shell script. Okay, so here like what I actually do right now after this is, so I'll actually go to this Docker playground. Does anyone know how to paste something over here? Previously, I used to have this option. It's not actually. So since this is Ubuntu, like you'll have Git installed already. Okay. So I have Git installed. What I'll do is Git clone. So I'll be cloning my repository. Like this is my repository URL. HTTPS slash XYZ folder. So this is my repository. So I got this code, which is actually cloned. So this is a folder like into which like the code is cloned. Okay, so you can see like this is the basic thing like which I'm actually cloning. So I can also show you this thing. So this is the code like which I actually posted like. Okay. So after that, like what I'll actually do is, so I'll start this container. Okay. Docker.
Pavan,
Yeah, tell me.
Control Shift V will work for that.
Control,
Shift V.
Control Shift B,
Yes, Pavan.
B for banana,
Ah, V, Pavan. V.
P for Pawan.
V for victory.
Okay, V for
Yeah.
victory. Okay. Control Shift V. Okay, thank you. You saved my time. So you can see this. This is actually running. The container is running, and I'm able to. So I start this container. So you're understanding, right? So what I'm actually trying to do. So my GitHub repo, so it accepts only these things. Like so, it accepts only static HTML pages. So how this Jekyll comes into picture is like, so it converts, like, so it is actually a templating engine kind of thing. So I'll show you the code. So how this Jekyll actually works, looks like. So it's just like a templating engine, okay? So I can just specify something like this site-based url.index/html, and then so for example, like this is my post.html. So if I want to have another page, like I can have JavaScript created. And if I want to include like any other HTML page. So for example, like I want to have my profile always present for wherever, which page I go, like I want to have my profile present over there. Like, okay. So I can include, like I can have like one profile.widget.html and I can include it. Like, so anyone like who is from HTML background or like UI development, like they understand the pain. Like, so if it is like a static page, like, so obviously like we need to have this HTML copied into all those pages, and then the maintenance is very difficult, right? So this is where like Jekyll actually comes into picture. Like, so you can actually include any HTML pages. And finally, like what it does is like, so it will actually generate static HTML pages out of this content. Okay. So finally, it creates a static HTML page. So yeah, so it creates all the static HTML pages. Okay. So it replaced all those HTML content, and finally it is generating a nice static HTML page for me. So it makes my life easy. I can simply upload this piece of code. So I can simply commit this code, like, so this sites.html into github.io, and then it picks it up. It picks it up. Okay. So now where are we with this? Sure. Okay, so this is running, and then so you can actually see. So what's the command like I'm using? So I'm using docker run -it. I'm running it in the detached mode, and then I'm exposing this port 4000. By default, like on the container, Jekyll runs on 4000. So I'm exposing, I'm also opening the port 4000 on this host machine. Like, so this is the host machine, not my laptop. And I'm mounting this volume. So you saw this, right? So I cloned the GitHub repo, and then I'm mounting that GitHub repo into this container. Okay, so I'm mounting it into this particular folder, Pavan XYZ folder on the container. Okay, and finally, this is the image name which I'm starting. Now, if you just click on this, so you'll be able to see this. Okay, so this is what you are actually looking at, right? So you can see like this is the IP like which you are actually seeing. So now you can actually use this. So if I'll just share it with, I can actually share this URL with anyone. Like you can actually open this particular URL and then you can simply make any changes over here. Okay. So finally, like, so for example, like I can write a new post or something like that, or edit an existing post. And once this is all done, so what I'll actually do is, so the Jekyll, what it is actually doing, it is actually generating these files, right? So these static HTML files. That's the main purpose of Jekyll over here. So once this is actually done, I'll simply commit my changes to the GitHub back. Okay. So I'll just commit my changes and then they'll be in the GitHub. Right? So if I wanted to have this Jekyll on my, this is actually constrained onto my laptop. So every time, like, so wherever I go, like I should actually carry this laptop. Okay. So I should have like Ruby installed. So for example, like I went on a vacation and then there I decided to write a blog on the travel or something like that. Okay. So, but there is a hard constraint. So I should actually take my laptop and then I should actually run this software, run this Jekyll software on this my host machine, and I need to do all these things. But here in this case, so I'm just I cannot I can avoid that, right? So I can actually go to this Docker playground and then so I can simply follow these steps. I can add a new post and then push it to GitHub, obviously. So do you find this interesting?
Yes, Pawan.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, this will be useful.
Yeah, so this is like a so blogging engine. So usually, like if you have habit of blogging, so there are tools like WordPress. So with WordPress, it is very easy. Like you can just log in into your WordPress account, and then so there you'll have it's a website. So in the WordPress, like you'll log in WordPress.com, and then so you can write your posts over there. But in this case, that is not the case. So I want to have my own customization. So it's like my own website. So whatever I wanted to do or whatever the customizations I wanted to do, so I can do. But with WordPress, so you have to pay. So for the free version, like you'll be limited with the customizations. Okay, so that is the advantage with one of the advantages with Docker. Like so, I'm making use of Docker in this way. So any questions on this use case? So how I'm actually doing, or any dots like which you are missing? So you're able to understand this, right? So I mean, what I'm actually doing behind the scenes.
Yes, Pavan.
Yes. We need to
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any questions on this? No questions, right?
Can you please share your GitHub repository also?
Sure, sure. I'll do that. Okay.
Can we fork it?
Yeah, you can fork it. But even though if you fork it, like so, it doesn't actually make any sense. So this particular URL, like XYZ folder, so this is actually tightly coupled with your username. Okay.
Okay.
So yeah.
It's not publicly.
Yeah, no. So I mean, the way you get this URL is like your username.github.io.
Okay. Got it.
And also the repo name, like the repo which you are creating, it should also follow the same pattern, like your username.github.io. So then only like GitHub will actually consider this as a GitHub pages, and then the URL will be accessible.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so this is all about like a Docker. So in this example, like different concepts which I'm actually covering is, so I created an image from the Docker file. Okay, so I showed you this Docker file, right? So this is the Docker file. Using this Docker file, I created an image on my laptop initially. Okay, so after creating this image on my laptop, I just pushed it to the GitHub. I mean, Docker repository, Docker Hub. Okay, so after pushing this particular image, so what I'm actually doing, so I'm actually cloning the code on some other machine. So it can be your machine or it can be like Docker Playground or wherever it is like, okay. So I'm just cloning my GitHub code over there, and then I'm doing like I'm running this container with the volume. I'm binding the volume. Okay. So once that is done, so I'm also starting the container with the port number. So with this port number, so I'm able to access this. So that is one of the advantages with this thing, like so Docker Playground. So you can actually, if you have like a temporary demo kind of thing, so what you can actually do is like, so you can use this Docker Playground and then expose a port and share the URL to anyone. So anyone with this URL, they'll be able to access this. So if you want to try, just try it, but don't change anything. So you can access this URL directly. And this URL doesn't have anything to do with like GitHub IO or something like this. So this is just a public URL, okay? So which is running on Jekyll server. Okay, so this is all about this Docker file. So we'll see more about this Docker file, but we completed all of these things, like all these commands. Like we saw Docker pull, we saw Docker push, removing an image, listing images, deleting images. We'll see this building a Docker image from this file. We also saw this tagging. So tagging is something like if you want to tag an existing image or if you want to rename an image, like you can actually use this tag option. So this is again like at the build time if you want to tag. And in some cases, like I'm not really sure like where this is actually useful, but you can also save this image as a tar file or something like that. Okay. So for example, like I have Docker images. So if I want to save this particular image, okay, so I can use like Docker save image name. Slash underscore Pavan. So you can save it as like a tar file. So tar is something like a zip file. Okay. And also once this is saved in as a tar file, like if you want to load, so you can share this tar file to someone else and then they can actually load this, create an image from this tar file using this command like docker load -i and then the tar file. It is taking some time. Okay. And coming back to this thing, like these are the commands like which can be used for logs. So for example, Docker logs, the container name. So if I want to see these logs in this Jekyll server, so this is the container ID, right? So if I want to see these logs, so you can see some of these logs. So these are all the bad requests or something like that. Okay. So this is about the logs. So any standard input output or anything like which you are writing to the standard IO, so they'll be visible in these logs. Okay. So this is about the statistics. So any stats related to this container. Docker stats. So it will just give you like how much memory it is actually using. So the allocated memory is like 16 GB. So my laptop, like it is a 16 GB machine and it is using like almost like it is allocated with 3 GB, 3 MB. Okay. So right now it is using like 3 MB out of the 16 GB. In network IO and any IOs. Like so these are about the statistics. No. So show the processor. If you want to see any processes of a container, like so you can actually issue this command like show docker top container name. For example. So these are the commands, like these are the processes which are running in my container, like okay. So it is like Jekyll server, like I'm running this command Jekyll serve. So this is just like npm serve, right? So the same way like this is Jekyll serve. And another thing which is actually running is like this entry point.sh, like this is the one which is actually running. So you can also get that information by getting inside this container. So once you get inside this container, so it's just like a normal Ubuntu machine where you can actually look for any processes or any information like which you wanted. So if you want to get a detailed information, so you can use like Docker inspect. Yeah. So this is again like a new command like which I never used, a Docker diff container. So this is just to show all those map ports. So here, like we were exposing some of those ports, right? So in order to show what are all the different ports that are exposed, so we can use this command. So just a command. Docker. See, you can see like, so the 4000 on the container, so it is being exposed as again like the same 4000 port on the host machine. So I'm killing this container. So now if you see Docker, will not be able to access this. So it should actually refresh, but it is not actually refreshing. This UI should actually refresh. Okay, yeah. So you can see that the port, open port, which is actually present like 4000. So it is actually closed. So this is all about like Docker CLI. So any questions till now? So tomorrow, like today, like we'll start with the Docker file, and then so we'll dig deep into the Docker file tomorrow. But these commands are very useful, like so they are very handy, and then so you should actually, so you're not actually required to memorize all these commands. So it is not required to keep all these commands in mind. So, but uh, the only intention, my intention is something like this. So you should actually know what each command is actually doing. Okay, so if you have a problem, so at least like for Googling, so you should have an idea, right? Which command you should use.
Correct.
Yeah. So I am very bad at remembering these commands. So that's the reason why like I go for cheat sheets whenever I start with a new technology or something. Okay. So any questions till this point, like any of these commands?
No problem.
No problem.
Okay. No questions, right? Okay. Then let's start with this Docker file. So in the first session, like I was mentioning, right? So a Docker file, it is nothing but like a basic template kind of thing. So it's just like a text file kind of thing. Okay. So what the only thing with this is like, so you're not supposed to save this file with any extension like .txt or something like that. So you should actually make sure like whenever like you're saving a text file, you can write your content in the text file, but when you're actually saving it, make sure that like you save it something like this. So it should be all files, and it is something like this. Docker file. So even the name is important. Like so, F should be small letter, and then D should be capital letter, kind of. Okay, so you need to save this Docker file, create a Docker file. And once you create a Docker file, it has like, I'll share you a cheat sheet with this. So this is again like another cheat sheet. So in this cheat sheet, let me open that. Okay. So this is the basic architecture of a Docker file. So the first command, it is supposed to be from, it can be like any content, any image. Okay. So it is something like this. So basically what you need to do is like, so you need to pick up like any base image. So it can be like an Ubuntu image, or it can be like a Docker image or something like that. It can be like any image. So it can be like a node image, or even it can be MongoDB image, anything it can be. Okay. So it is something like, so you are taking you're taking an image which is already present. Okay. So in this case, so we are taking this Ubuntu image. And which tag I'm using? I'm using the latest tag. So when I use this latest tag, so, so you can see like there are multiple supported tags. So if you want to go with like Ubuntu 18 version, so you can provide this 18.04 or something like that. So if you want to go ahead with like version 20 of Ubuntu, so you can go with this image with this tag. Okay, these are all the supported tags. But by default, like if you provide the latest, so it will take 20, I believe. Yeah. So this is the latest tag. Okay. And this was pulled like 7 days back. So once, so it is something like this. So basically, like in order to create a new image, so you should already have an existing image which you should take as a base. Okay. So you can take this Ubuntu latest as a base image, or you can also take the image like which I created. So Ubuntu Pavan. So for example, like I'll create an image from this by taking this as a base image. So I want to create a new image by taking this image as a base image. Okay. So this is my public image. And note, like you are supposed to have this particular from image either on your laptop or it should be publicly available. So since I posted my image to the Docker Hub, so this is actually possible. So I need to specify 1.0. So what I'm actually doing is, so I'm trying to create a new image from this image as base. So this is my base image. And this image, when you see like, so this is again based on Ubuntu image, right? So after that, like whatever like you wanted to do. So for example, I'm setting some environmental variable. So Debian frontend is a non-interactive, or I want to set some env values, something like my first env. Okay, so I'm creating like env variables. So let's ignore all these items. I wanted to edit this topic. Okay, so I'm taking this from which image like I want to take as a base. So I want to take this as a base image. So I'm taking this as my base image and the tag is 1.0. So I wanted to create a small directory like, so in order to execute like any commands when the image is getting created, so you need to specify like run. Okay. So I want to create a directory like, so the command to create a directory in Ubuntu is like make directory. So I can simply do run make directory, the name of the directory like it is. So this is a simple image like which I wanted to create. delete few of these images. I'm just deleting all these junk images. No. So the command to create a new image from the Docker file is something like this. Okay, so you need to specify Docker build. So if you want to tag this image, like if you want to tag, if you want to name that image, so you need to specify -t, and then the directory dot. Okay. So I'm in the current directory, like I'm in the same directory where I have my Docker file. Okay, so this is the Docker file which I have. This is the Docker file, right? So I'm in the current directory. So I'll use Docker build. So -t tag new image for demo. So this is the tag like which I wanted to provide. And so simply I can specify dot. So when you specify dot, what this Docker engine does is like, so in the current directory, it will search for this Docker file. Okay. So if it doesn't actually find a Docker file, so that is the reason why, like I said, like we are not supposed to have any extensions like .txt or any custom name. Okay. So by default, like it will search for a file with this file name, like Docker file. Okay. So after that, like it will create a content image from this. It is actually building an image. Okay, so when it is actually building an image, so you can see these commands like, so the first step, there are two commands like which I gave. So the first one is like from which base image, like I should actually take a new image. The second command is like, I wanted to create a directory inside this particular image. Okay, so you can actually see, so this is actually blue. This is the first command that got executed. This is the step one. Okay. And then you can actually see this is the step two, run mk directory. Okay. Again, like if you execute this particular command, so now I'll show you this image in Docker images. Okay. So this is the new image which got created from the Docker file. So now if I get inside this container, Docker run -it /bin/bash. So do you think like since I took this particular image from this thing like so Ubuntu with Nano Pavan, so do you think like by default this image will the new container which I'm running like okay so which I'm running from this new image from demo, so do you think like it will have Nano and then the folders like which we created?
Yes,
I think yes, Pawan.
Ideally like it should it should have it because so we are creating a new image from this image existing image which has all that stuff.
Then it will have nano everything.
Yeah, so let's see. Docker run -it. So I'm inside this new container, which was built from this Docker file. ls. So you can actually see a.txt. Okay. And you also have this new folder. So you have this folder, which we got this Pavan and a.txt from this image. Okay. Whereas like this Pavan Arya AAA, this was actually created in the Docker image file, Docker file. So is it clear or am I making it complicated? So you can see that I have Nano. So is it clear?
Yes, Pawan.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Yes.
No. Okay. So you can see like I'm able to create a new image from an existing image. Okay. And then on top of this image, like I'm able to create a new thing. So now I'll do another thing. Like run. So run apt get update. So I wanted to install apt get some software, like, so which software I want to install? I want to install some software. Can someone tell me a software like which we wanted to install?
Nginx చేయన్నా.
So yeah, so install Nginx on Ubuntu. I'll Google it. So it is not required to remember all these commands, like, okay. So you should have the basic understanding. So now I wanted to install Nginx on Ubuntu. So Ubuntu container, right? So it's just like you're installing Nginx on Ubuntu. Okay. So I'm doing like sudo apt get update and then apt install Nginx. So this is the thing. Install Nginx. So I'm installing this Nginx. Okay. So I changed my Docker file, right? I'll delete this old file. Docker image. Docker. It got deleted. So what's the command to build an image from the Docker file? Docker build tag Pavan underscore Nginx. Okay. So it is Nginx. I'm just naming it as Pavan underscore Nginx, and then dot. So we have an issue over here. Okay, what is that? Okay. So if you see, so let's look at this particular log carefully. Like, so I'm trying to build this image like from this Docker file, and in the Docker file, what I did, so I added two more steps. Like one is Docker apt get update, and the other is like Docker install Nginx. Okay. So the first step, like if are you able to see this? Like this is in blue color, so it is difficult for me to see. So you're able to see this, right? The blue color lines.
Not much actually.
Yeah, so it's not clear. Like even yeah. So
Editor.
But step by step.
yeah, but carefully identify this. So now we have how many steps? Like we have 4 steps. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So now if you see, previously we used to get like 1/2. Okay. So now we are getting like 1 out of 4. So you see this first step is like I'm taking this Docker Pavan Aryasomayajulu / Ubuntu with this is as my base image. And after that, if you see, there is something called as cached. Okay. Cached for second step. Okay. So what is happening behind the scenes is by default, whenever like we are executing any of these Docker files, okay. So what it does is like, so it caches like it's something like a layered kind of thing. Okay. So this is layer 1. So this is layer 2. This is layer 3, and this is layer 4. So whenever like for the first time, like when we are actually building this particular image, so it tries to execute all of these steps. So after that, like if you make any changes to this particular Docker file, and then if you are adding more steps or making modifications to the existing steps, what it does is like, so it will see like if it can cache like any existing steps. Okay. So for example, like this is the previous step, like which we already executed, like we didn't make any change in this step, right? So that is the reason why like it is actually caching that step so that like it can speed up. Okay. So that is the second step. And third step, if you see, like it is running apt get update. So it is updating all this Ubuntu. The fourth step, so it is throwing an error. So why it is throwing an error? So it is trying to install this Nginx. So it is reading the package list and it is doing all the necessary stuff. But finally, so it is it is asking for user input. Like, so whenever like we install any packages, so it asks for user input, like whether you want to continue with the installation or do you want to abort, kind of thing. So you need to specify always yes. So for that, like what I'll do is like, so by default, I'll specify -y as an option. So it's just like it doesn't have like manual intervention. So again, like I'll execute this command. So this time you can actually see the third step is also cached. See, and see like the apt get install Nginx. So it is taking some good amount of time. It is taking almost like 13 seconds. Let's see like how much time it takes. It's taking like good amount of. But this is a solid use case for showing you the cache. So meanwhile, like so before this actually gets completed. So any questions like till now? I see like many first timers, right? So obviously like you should have some questions.
Yeah, one more observation is it is second time when it is started, it is not running from step one. It is
No, it will actually run from step one. So you can actually see
Yeah,
this is step 1 out of 4, and second step and third step, they're actually cached.
cached. Yes.
So we can actually see. So I'll add another step to this file and then I'll again create a new
Now
image.
it is running it.
Yeah, so now you can see this fourth step. So it took almost like 94 seconds like for completing. So especially like most of the time it's spent on this installation, like Nginx installation, right?
Correct. Correct.
Docker images. And this is the image like which got created, Docker images. So I'll remove this image, Docker RMI -f. I'm just removing that image. Okay. So now I'll add like one more step. One mkdir. Okay. So I'll add another new directory. Okay. So I'm adding another directory. So now if I build this image, so previously like in this step, like in the fourth step itself, like it took almost like 80 seconds, 80 to 90 seconds. Now let's see like how much time it actually takes.
Already cached.
So you can actually see, so the entire process, it got completed in just 2.8 seconds. And if you see the log, so the first step is the Docker from, the second step, it is cached, third step, it is cached, fourth step, it is cached, apt get install Nginx and all that stuff. Fifth step, it executed this make directory. Okay. So now if I run this image, Docker run -it /bin/bash ls. Okay. So I'm not really sure like where we have this Nginx related stuff. Let's take this. UB try.
In the
www. Yeah, cdww and cdhtml. Okay. So you'll have this index.nginx-debian.html. Okay. So you can say this like, so I'm not actually exposing any port. You can see this container Docker. Yes. Okay. So even it is not actually running. So this is again just a simple, though I'm installing Nginx on this. So I'm not actually starting this Nginx server or anything with this. Like, so I took in base Ubuntu image, which has like Nano already installed. And after that, like I'm installing few softwares, but I'm not actually starting these softwares. So this will actually do tomorrow. Okay. how to expose a port and how we can actually simulate a real Nginx image kind of thing. Okay, so with real Nginx image, like we are able to start this Nginx server when we run the container, right? So we'll also see how we can actually do with our customization. So any questions?
Yeah, Pavan.
Yeah.
Yeah, here the cached means the cached part for the only particular window. Once we exit that PowerShell window and open in, say, run the same command in separate PowerShell window, it takes 90 seconds, or it's similar like a 2 seconds.
I'll show that to you. Okay, Docker uses. So I'll delete this Docker RMI -F. So I'm deleting that image. So I'm closing all my PowerShell windows. I'm opening a fresh instance of PowerShell. So it is Docker build Pavan _ Nginx -3 option. And finally, like I want to set dot current directory. Okay, so even after closing the PowerShell window, it is still caching. So that is the logic which Docker handles, like the Docker engine handles.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions?